city county?
joint meeting,
The 17th?
September.
September. Oh, we wait.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
It's on my calendar for September.
Yes, yes.
We're all excited.
Yeah. Kina, you ready? Hello, I call the Charlottesville City Council July 15th.
Sorry.
No, 15th meeting to order. Ms. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Oshrin,
Here.
Councilor Payne,
Here?
Vice Mayor Pinkston,
Here.
Councilor Snook, hopefully he's on his way, and Mayor Wade.
Here. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve or amend the agenda?
I move for approval of the agenda.
Second.
Okay, here's Lloyd. It's been moved and properly seconded. We can cast our vote.
You can vote quick.
Yeah.
Say you're here first.
I'm here. Here.
Got it.
This meeting will be divided into 3 sections. The first section is a work session where we're here and discuss presentations that do not require a council vote. And the second will be a closed session, and then there will be a regular business meeting at 6:30. And the first will be reports, and it's the 2024 Climate Action Report. So, Crystal?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Mr. Sanders. I'm Crystal Rittervold, Director of the Office of Sustainability, and I'm joined this afternoon by Emily Irvin, our Climate Program Manager. Thank you for having us here this afternoon to share the inaugural Climate Action Report. It's an update that is planned to be provided on an annual basis. For starters, I would like to thank Council for investing in the work. You adopted Charlottesville's first Community Climate Action Plan in 2023 as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. We now have a dedicated 3-person climate team in our Office of Sustainability. We had FY24 capital funding allocated for climate action for the first time ever, and now included annually in the 5-year adopted CIP. And in this presentation, you will hear that referred to as a climate fund. We use some of this funding to serve as the required local match for federal grants. We are allocating funds to several new initiatives that you'll hear about today. And we're committed to using this funding to lead by example as a government organization to support climate actions in the community and to leverage outside funding where possible. I would also like to start this afternoon with a sincere thank you to my team members, several here, colleagues, peers, partners, and friends for the collective hard work and support that has gone into the last couple of years as it relates to our climate program. I feel a sense of momentum and a real sense of urgency like never before. And that urgency is making itself very tangible today given our extreme and extended heat conditions and drought warnings. Increasingly, we are experiencing the results of the Climate is Everywhere directive that opens the door for many city departments to do climate work. Increasingly, we're also finding opportunities to work with our neighbors, Albemarle County and the University of Virginia, and you'll hear about all of this momentarily. Climate change and the impact it is having is an enormous global problem that demands action at every scale. And while many of these actions are beyond our local control, we are locally committed and making progress. Climate action comes in many forms of programs and projects and policies and possibilities that we're learning about. Climate action work doesn't always have to be hard, but some of it really is, and we're learning to appreciate both the wins and the incremental steps it's taking to get there. If we can show that bringing the clean economy into our community, for our people, for our businesses, and our environment, we can help not only build resilience, but to demonstrate the benefits of this critical transition, and particularly the local benefits. We see and appreciate that this community is engaged and involved, delivering relevant and unique local programs and services. Also expecting and demanding a pace of climate action that gets at the needed results. Collectively, we're trying to do our part, and we're encouraged to be part of a network of other communities working to do their parts. What you will be receiving today is a climate program update that includes a rapid summary of the work that's been done by the city and community partners recently completed or recently accomplished, as well as some exciting initiatives that are teed up for this coming year. We'd love to spend all day talking to you about this, but we are sensitive to the fact that we have a time limit. So we are going to celebrate for a moment, but just for a moment, as there is much work to be done. And so with that, I'd like to turn this over to Emily, and then when she gets through her slides, she and I are super happy to field any comments or questions that you have for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Crystal. All right. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Let's see. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to work this. Oh, look, it's easy. All right. So my name's Emily, and I'm the Climate Program Manager. I want to start off by thanking you all for your time this afternoon and for your commitment to climate action. So first, I'm going to give you all an update on our most recent greenhouse gas inventory. Then we'll take a look back at the work that's been done since the passage of the Climate Action Plan. Then I will give you a preview of our newly launched Climate and Sustainability Dashboard. And then I'll end up with an overview of the work that's on the horizon for the updated work plan. And we'll have time for some questions. So this is a slide that everyone has seen before. But I wanted to start off with what our high-level emissions reduction goals are and what the Climate Action Plan is. So Charlottesville has community-wide emissions reduction goals of 45% by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. And we have a strategic level climate action plan to help us guide us towards those goals. So the plan promises an annual update, an annual progress report, and this is the first one of those updates. So this is not an update to the plan itself, but a progress report. And City Manager Sanders has asked the Office of Sustainability to align the annual update with the fiscal year, so this update actually covers the 18 months since the adoption of the Climate Action Plan. So next I'm going to go through the inventory. Under our commitment to the Global Covenant of Mayors, which Council signed on to in 2017, we do an annual accounting of our greenhouse gas emissions. So going forward, we're going to align these emissions inventory updates with this annual CAP update. So this chart shows Charlottesville's 2022 community-wide emissions. And in 2022, our community released approximately 268,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, which is about 42% less than in our baseline year when we released 460,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So when I say CO2 equivalent, what I mean is that this inventory includes carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, or N2O emissions. So, and when I talk about community-wide emissions, I'm talking about all the emissions from our community, exclusive of our municipal emissions. We account for our municipal emissions in a separate inventory because the way of our reporting works, and I'll get into the details of that a little bit in a moment. They represent less than 5% of the community's total emissions, which you can see on the next slide. Our municipal emissions were a little over 12,000 metric tons in 2022, and they're down 36% from that 2011 baseline. So this pie chart is inclusive of all of our community emissions. The municipal wedge is included here, and shows the breakdown by sector. So municipal emissions are shown in the light blue wedge. That accounts for the emissions from city and school buildings, CATS operations, the city's vehicle fleet, and our streetlights and traffic signals. As you can see, buildings account for nearly 2/3 of emissions in our community. So this includes our homes, our businesses, non-municipal government facilities, and industrial buildings. This data is collected mostly from Dominion Energy and Charlottesville Gas. Transportation accounts for almost another third. That's the dark green wedge. This data comes from VDOT and Amtrak. There are two small sections. The yellow is from waste, so our garbage and our wastewater. This data comes from the Planning District Commission and Rivanna authorities. And then that last salmon-colored wedge is related to fugitive emissions from natural gas infrastructure, and that's a number that we get from Charlottesville Gas. So the next two slides are really data heavy. I'm not going to spend very much time here. I just wanted them to be in the packet for you all and for the public. This chart shows our community-wide emissions each year, each inventory year since the baseline. And this next slide shows the municipal emissions each year since that baseline. So as shown in the first graph, our community-wide emissions are down 42% since our baseline year, 2011. And so considering that our 2030 goal is 45%, we're getting close, and that's really good news. We saw a large drop in residential energy use in just the past year. Since last year, 2021, we saw an almost 11% drop in residential emissions, and this might be influenced by the weather, a mild winter, but grid greening is also really having an influence as our electricity service gets cleaner. On a per kilowatt basis, emissions from electricity are down about 38% since 2011, and this is a trend that we expect to continue as Virginia's Clean Economy Act starts to have an impact on what our emissions in this sector look like. Also, since the baseline, transportation emissions are dropping. They're down 41% since 2011. Some of this is due to fewer vehicle miles traveled, which is data that we get from VDOT and is in the inventory. That's down about 8%, but the trend is really driven by increased vehicle efficiency and the adoption of electric vehicles. In Charlottesville, 1 in 6 new vehicles registered in the city in 2022 were electric. So municipal emissions were up very slightly from our 2021 inventory, about 1%. We believe this is largely due to the return to normal after COVID, and the return to regular building occupancy and usage. But again, overall, our municipal emissions are down 36% since our baseline year. So beyond being committed to doing this inventory on an annual basis, we are also committed through our Global Covenant of Mayors membership that we publicly report our emissions. So we use a platform called CDP, which used to stand for Carbon Disclosure Project. And that is a global nonprofit that helps businesses and communities around the globe to track and report their emissions, including nearly 200 cities here in the United States. So in 2023, we earned a CDP score of A-, which that is considered to be in the leadership level. And that's up from a B in 2022, which is considered to be in the emissions management level. So that upgrade in our scoring is due to the formal adoption of the Climate Action Plan and then also the kickoff of our resilience planning effort through the Resilient Together project. So we earned both our mitigation and adaptation badges from Global Covenant of Mayors, which means that we're in compliance with that commitment that was made back in 2017. And just a little note about the years. So it takes a little while for the data to be collected for an emissions inventory, and so that's why our newest inventory that we just completed is for calendar year 2022, and then I reported them through CDP in calendar year 23, and so that's where that difference in the years is coming from. So in the next section, I'm going to give an overview of climate actions that have been accomplished since January of 2023 when the climate plan was adopted. There's a written report that accompanies this presentation that was in you all's packet today. I hope that you all have had an opportunity to skim it and that you get a chance to actually read it. There's a lot more detail than what I have time to provide here. But for now, I'm going to give an overview of the initiatives and projects that we've been working on, and I will touch on projects that are being led by the Office of Sustainability, are being led by other city departments, and a few projects that are community partner led. And as I mentioned, there's a lot more detail in the report. I'm going to go over this by sector also. So if you think back to that pie chart that I showed a few minutes ago, the biggest wedge was the dark blue wedge. That's our buildings wedge, which accounts for about 2/3 of the emissions in our community. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that there's been a lot of activity in this sector over the last year and a half. So the Office of Sustainability and the Utilities Department both work with the Local Energy Alliance program, better known as LEAP. They were here to talk to you just a few weeks ago to promote energy efficiency programs throughout the community. Energy efficiency is one of the best ways to use less energy and therefore reduce emissions from the built environment. LEAP also works with our electricity provider Dominion on their low-income solar program, and they work to make solar adoption easier for market rate clients through their annual Solarize campaign. On the municipal side, the Office of Sustainability partners with Public Works on our energy and water management program, which works to conserve energy and water in municipal facilities and schools. Also on the municipal side, we are happy to now have in place a master energy performance agreement that will allow us to start doing energy upgrades and energy retrofit projects on city and school buildings, along with measuring and verifying the savings that are coming from those projects and tracking the cost savings as well. I know you all have heard a lot about the gas utility decarbonization study, which is currently underway. The gas service new connection fee that will go into effect in January is an early result of this study, and we certainly count that as a climate win. Efforts in this sector that are community-led include the numerous EV charging and solar installations at people's homes and businesses using the permitting system. We know that in 2023, Charlottesvillians applied for 123 solar installation permits and 16 permits for installing EV charging at their homes. Also being led by community-based organizations through their climate services program that launched last year, the Community Climate Collaborative, better known as C3, provided energy consulting services to nonprofits and small and medium-sized businesses, many of those free of charge. We know that our partners at Piedmont Housing Alliance completed the first phase of their Kindlewood redevelopment project this year, and those new homes are built to federal high-performance building standards and are partially powered by solar. So like I mentioned, this is just an overview of the work that's happening in the community in the building sector. So on the transportation side, you all have heard a lot recently about CAT's alternative fuels study.
Can I ask a quick question?
Certainly.
Is that okay? So going back to the prior screen to talk about buildings, what impact, I know there have been building code changes that have occurred. I guess they come out every 3 years. My understanding is those continue to ratchet down or up, depending on how you want to look at it, in terms of energy conservation. Are we tracking that in some way, what impact that might have?
Yeah, so updating the building codes is something that has to happen at the state level.
Right.
And so that is certainly something that we keep an eye on.
Okay.
And there's a section actually in the report about the state level advocacy that we track and that our office is involved in, and building codes are certainly something that is part of that.
Okay.
And given any opportunity that we have to advocate for the adoption at the state level of the international energy codes that are considered to be the strongest, we think that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
So anyway, you all have heard a lot recently about CAT's alternative fuel study and, of course, their transit strategic plan. And so we're very excited about the upcoming battery electric bus pilot and the decision that you all made to have CAT's fleet be zero emissions by 2040 is a big climate win for this community. This year, our office relaunched our EV infrastructure grant program that is aimed at helping to install publicly accessible charging near businesses and recreation sites, and that is a program that is open, and we would love to hear from businesses who are interested in publicly accessible charging. There have been a lot of improvements to Charlottesville's bike and ped infrastructure this year, including ADA compliance in more places and our first ever concrete barrier protected bike lanes on the Belmont Bridge. I've heard varying opinions about them, but Veo's e-bikes and scooters are helping Charlottesville community members to reduce their car trips, meaning they ride scooters in lieu of taking cars. And so almost, this is like a mind-boggling statistic to me, but almost 450,000 miles were ridden on scooters and e-bikes last year, helping to avoid nearly 60,000 car trips, which is really cool. And on the community side, Charlottesville residents, of course, are very involved in working to improve our city's transportation systems. C3 Zero Emissions Bus Advocacy Letter had nearly 650 signatures, and the Piedmont Mobility Alliance, of course, is working in our community to advance accessible, active transportation. So on this slide, we're sharing a list of climate actions taken in the past year that don't fall into the buildings or transportation sectors, but are definitely noteworthy for their climate value. In the interest of time, I won't go into detail on all of them, but they're in the report and we're happy to answer questions. So the LED streetlight project, which was funded in the fiscal year 24 CIP, is getting kicked off starting on the 250 bypass near McIntyre Park. And this will be a multi-year effort that will result in both energy and cost savings. In 2023, Parks and Rec planted nearly 352-inch diameter trees on public right-of-ways and parks and school yards. And they have plans to plant approximately 175 more this fall. Separately, they planted almost 1,300 saplings at 9 forest restoration projects in city parks around town, removing invasive species and restoring 20 acres of forest. The city's flood resilience plan was recently approved by the state, which is a prerequisite that makes us eligible for implementation funding. This was a multi-year project that was completed by the city's Water Resources Protection Program. Community-based organizations like Relief and the Charlottesville Area Tree Stewards planted additional trees on both public and private property and helped to care for all the newly planted trees. And Piedmont Master Gardeners helps homeowners plan and plant sustainable yards with native species.
So, Emily, I was going to ask this afterwards, but I see for the streetlight conversion, several slides back where you had streetlights / traffic. Is that traffic signals? Is that what you referred to?
Yes.
So the bulbs or how they power that, is that energy efficient? So if you could talk a little bit about that.
So the purpose of that project is to replace the old bulbs with LED bulbs, which are much more energy efficient. And so most of the streetlights in town are not the traffic signals, but the streetlights are owned by Dominion. And so we are working with Dominion to have them accelerate the replacement schedule. They will replace them with LEDs when they burn out, but that could take a very long time. And so the cost savings that will be recognized by replacing those bulbs with LEDs will result in energy and cost savings in just a couple of years.
I assume they use different ones than they use in the house, because we love ours, but it takes a few seconds to warm up a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can see him talking to Judge, like, but Judge, it was pink, it was going from red. But anyway, I understand.
So the traffic signals are owned by?
That's it.
The traffic signals are owned by the city, but the street lights are owned by Dominion.
I heard it backwards.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
Natalie,
maybe
did you
no
have?
sense.
Yeah, I've got a question about the cost savings for that. Who pays for that, and how does that work? Like, if Dominion owns them, do they bill us?
Yeah, so we
Or-
basically pay a monthly rate per fixture, and so it used to be that it was cost prohibitive and actually a disincentive to switch it to LEDs. And in the last contract that was negotiated on behalf of many public bodies in Virginia, that monthly rate has made it much more, now it's cost effective, so that the payback is in this like 3.5 to 4 year period.
Okay, great. And is it billed, like, is there a little meter in each light, or like, how does?
No, it's by unit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
it's a
a
flat
flat
rate.
rate, okay, thanks.
All right, are you guys ready for me to move on?
Yes.
Any more
Thank you.
questions? Okay. So let's see. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so so far I've been talking about mostly mitigation actions, so reducing our emissions, but I also want to take a moment to highlight our Resilient Together project, which is in collaboration with Albemarle County and UVA, and this is our climate adaptation and resilience building project. We publicly launched this project back in September of 2023 and have been working since to share information with the community about the local impacts of climate change, and then also to learn from the community about their risks and vulnerabilities. We've done this education and outreach through a variety of ways, both public and private presentations, staff and stakeholder workshops, public events, and then recently we've been working to raise awareness about cooling centers that the city's operating, and also the health impacts of heat stress. So Resilient Together received a grant through EPA's Environmental Justice Government to Government program, which is part of the Inflation Reduction Act, to support inclusive community engagement. We're using those funds to fund a project within a project called the Climate Resilience Cohort, and I will talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about other federal grants that we have worked on this year. This has been a large part of our work. So as you all know, this is an unprecedented time for federal investment in climate action, and much of that investment is coming through these competitive grant opportunities. So I already mentioned that Environmental Justice Government to Government grant. The county was the lead applicant on that, but the city is a primary partner, and the funds will go to the Resilient Together project. Parks and Rec staff collaborated with sustainability staff to apply for and win a Forest Service grant that will support an updated forest management plan. We were successful in securing $420,000 through EPA's Clean School Bus Rebate Program for 2 electric school buses that will be joining the fleet in 2025. The city has been allocated through Department of Energy's Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program, $76,000, which will be used to fund home energy audits in low and middle income households throughout the city, and helping them to take advantage of additional federal efficiency incentive programs. Our utilities department was successful in securing $7.1 million for replacement of that last mile of cast iron pipe in the natural gas system with more modern materials, and that will reduce fugitive emissions from our natural gas infrastructure. We are awaiting news on a $1.6 million application to another DOE grant program, Seasite. And should we be successful in that opportunity, that will fund energy retrofits, solar, and job training at K-Tech. So applying for grants is a lot of additional work, but it's kind of critical for funding a lot of projects that we want to do, and we're really grateful to the support of our grant staff in the Office of Community Solutions. They are always willing to help, even when we don't give them a lot of time. So we're really grateful for that. So this next portion of the presentation is a little bit of a surprise that we are excited to share with you all this afternoon. We know there's a lot of interest in our work, and we're aware of the need to get as many community members activated and engaged in this work as possible. So we're pleased to announce the launch of our Climate and Sustainability Dashboard. So this dashboard is an engagement tool that will both increase awareness of and transparency of our work. It'll make the Climate Action Plan more accessible, and it will be a place where we can tell stories and share resources and showcase and highlight the work of our community partners. The address for this new dashboard is down at the bottom there in the blue box. And you can get to this through the city's website or by putting that address into your browser. It currently has 3 main parts, and if you look up to the top right there, there's 3 links. First, I'll show you how the dashboard displays the Climate Action Plan. So when you click on Climate Action Plan up there in the corner, it brings up a new menu that we call the accordion, and you'll notice these categories are aligned with the chapters in the Climate Action Plan. So for example, let's click on Buildings and Energy. So that brings up a display of each of the strategies and key actions of each segment of the CAP with a status in update for each action. And so yellow means additional resources needed, which can either mean staff or financial resources. Blue means in progress, and green means complete. So now we'll go back to the main part of the dashboard. And if you scroll down, go back to that main page, and then you scroll down, you'll see these tiles displayed beneath the main banner by sector. And so this is the menu that routes you to all the information about our inventory, our programs, initiatives, and community partners. And so, for example, if we click on the transportation tile, you get one of these topic tiles, and it gives you information about the subject first, and then you keep scrolling down, and you can learn about various actions that the city is taking and ways that our community members can get involved, and actions that any individual can take. So all of the action items are organized on the What You Can Do page. Again, organized by sector. So as an example, if we click on buildings and energy, that pulls up a new page with links to resources and actions. And you can see here this links to LEAP and to their Solarize campaign, some federal benefits, energy savings tips. So these static slides don't really do justice to how cool the dashboard is. So we hope that everybody, you all and the folks maybe listening at home, will take some time to explore it. And again, the address for that is climateaction.charlottesville.gov. So for the final section of this presentation, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the projects and initiatives that are upcoming. So part of the packet that you all received for this afternoon is our new fiscal year 25 climate program work plan. So you'll recognize many of the items that are on it. These are ongoing projects or in-process projects that rolled over from last year, but there's also quite a few new items, so I want to highlight some of those. So we are getting ready to launch a community-wide EV charging study. So this study will evaluate our community needs for EV charging, considering public, private, and workplace charging. This study is being undertaken collaboratively with Albemarle County, so it won't just be the city, it will also be county areas. And we're working with a consulting group that has done comparable studies in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. They will also examine the opportunities for municipal light-duty fleet electrification and help us to lay the groundwork to be better poised to apply for infrastructure funding grants. The cost of this project is about $110,000, and it'll come from the Climate Fund. So the
I just got a quick question. The areas places you go to charge your car, I noticed that people use an app to find it, and I assume that there is a cost. Do localities charge as well, to charge your car when you go to?
So do you have to pay for electricity for charging?
Yes.
So yes, for the most part, you pay on a per kilowatt basis. And depending on who owns the charging station and how fast the charging is, that impacts the rate. So, Albemarle County used to have free charging at the county office building, but that you now have to pay for that starting July 1st. And I think that they're not really trying to make any money off of those stations. They're just charging for the electricity. But for example, some places you go and there's privately installed charging stations, and you pay a little higher rate. There's quite a few models for who owns the stations. A lot of third-party companies own the charging stations, and then maybe they pay a cost share to the property owner. So there can be some cost-sharing opportunity there. Sometimes municipalities install charging and charge whatever the going rate is in the region.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, there's several models, and the study will look at, how can we incentivize charging? What are the, how can we incentivize private entities to install charging? What are the differences that the city may need to make up? How can we ensure that charging is widely available in our community?
Thank you.
So the next project I'm going to talk about is one that I am personally very excited about. So many people are aware of the incentives and programs that are available to individuals through the Inflation Reduction Act, but there's often a lot of confusion about how to access those benefits and programs. So through an expansion of our annual program support agreement, we are going to work with LEAP and C3 to set up a community energy resource hub. This hub is going to be both an online and an in-person resource for the community to help them navigate federal, state, and local energy programs, and for both commercial and residential buildings. So planning for the hub is already underway, and we aim to open it to the public in January of 2025, which that aligns with the state launching their federally funded clean energy programs. And the hub will serve both city and county residents and is planned to be co-funded. So I mentioned this next project briefly when I talked about our grants work. This year we will update our urban forest management plan, which has not been updated since 2009. This project is partially funded by a USDA grant with supplemental funding from the Climate Fund. The updated plan will be aligned with the newer comprehensive plan, the climate plan, and the climate risk and vulnerability assessment, and it will cover the entire urban forest on both public and private property. The Office of Sustainability is supporting our urban forester and the Parks and Rec Department on this work. So I mentioned a little bit Resilient Together and our climate resilience cohort. So we are working to launch this cohort right now, which is a sub-project within that larger Resilient Together project. This piece is funded by a $460,000 EPA grant. We are currently looking for up to 10 community-based organizations who serve vulnerable and underserved underrepresented community members. Each organization will receive a $40,000 sub-grant to participate in the planning process and also to implement a community-led resilience building project. The application for that sub-grant opportunity is currently open, and interested organizations should visit the Resilient Together website to learn more and to access our application materials. That web address is resilient-together.info.
Question about that?
Yeah.
How, other than you coming here today and broadcasting that, which is important, and I want you to say that again, how do people find out about this? What outreach are we doing?
So we did a news flash. We have been on the news. It came out today in Albemarle County's newsletter.
Is there any direct outreach?
We are doing direct outreach to organizations. We've had meetings with community partners who signed letters of support for the grant opportunity, and we've also had meetings with other outside entities. We've been sort of shaking the bushes and getting people aware of this grant opportunity for a couple of months leading up to the launch. But we are really happy to have folks that we're not already connected with if they think it would be a good fit to learn more about this opportunity.
If there aren't 10, will the leftover funds get redistributed to the...
Yeah, so what we're doing is every organization will get $15,000 to participate in the cohort and the planning. And then every organization will be guaranteed $25,000 for their implementation project. But if they want to work together to implement a larger project, they'll have the opportunity to pool their funds. And if there's leftover funds because we didn't get 10 participants in the cohort, we'll use those for the implementation projects.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. So this piece of the project is really designed to ensure that the community engagement for the Resilient Together project is equitable and inclusive, and that the interests and needs of our most vulnerable community members are centered both in the plans and in the implementation. We're pleased to share information about our Municipal Energy Performance Program. This one has been a long time coming into fruition. Back in 2022, we worked with an engineering firm to perform energy audits on all city facilities, including schools. These audits gave recommendations on all the energy savings projects that could be done at each facility, including lighting, HVAC, controls upgrades, and they also include solar potential, emissions reduction potential for every facility. It took quite a bit of time, but we recently were able to establish a master energy performance contract, which is the design build project delivery mechanism that's uniquely well suited for these kinds of projects. The first municipal energy savings project using this contracting mechanism is underway, and with a second in the planning process. And the original energy audits that were part of this project did not contemplate building electrification, and so another upcoming element of this work is a municipal building electrification study. So another project that has been in the works for quite a while that we're excited about for this new fiscal year, the Office of Sustainability is planning to launch an internal sustainability in the workplace program, and this will promote employee action and engagement across the city organization. It will focus mostly on energy and water actions, but also include climate and inclusivity elements as well. And launch of this program will also include the establishment of an interdepartmental climate action working group that will bring staff together from across the city organization for mutual learning, collaboration, and accountability in our climate work. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skim over some of our other upcoming initiatives. We are still working to bring CPACE, which is a financial tool to help commercial entities fund clean energy, energy efficiency, and resilience projects to Charlottesville. We're working with Public Works on a high-performance building standard for all city and school buildings, as well as updating the city's green building policy. We're exploring power purchase agreements as a way to develop solar on city and school buildings. We have convened an internal staff group across the relevant departments to get ready for our 2 electric school buses that are coming and to plan for electrification of the rest of the fleet. We're working with Neighborhood Development Services to launch an e-bike incentive program later this year. We're working with Public Works to expand, and Parks, to expand our 24/7 drop-off composting program. And we're also working with Parks to do a pilot electrification of some of their landscaping equipment. So that was a lot, and I think I hit everything. And we hope, like we said, if you haven't already had time to look at the accompanying report, that you will check that out. And thank you again for your time, and Crystal and I are happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
Michael, I'll start with you, sir.
Sure. And yeah, like you remarked at the beginning, it's just incredible to see in just a few years how far this work has gone. I remember in 2020 talking, I think, with people in CVO 100 who just wanted like 1 additional climate staff member hired, and that was like the big ask. And now there's a whole department reporting directly to the city manager's office, $1 million fund, all this work going on, formal climate action plan and the comprehensive plan in really just a short number of years. 2 questions related to the work plan. Maybe it's just not in the FY25, but one is a couple years ago, I think LEAP was ready to move forward with installing a solar panel fleet at the Charlottesville airport, and that's something that I guess the airport didn't really engage with. I know it's a little separate from us, but there's a authority that we have representation on. Would that be included in the power purchase agreements work, or is that a separate thing to try to engage them with that opportunity?
Well, so since that is in the county and not in our work plan, that I don't know that much about that project, but Crystal might know more about it.
Actually, it's very funny, like that solar would be in the county. However, I think that was a model considered a community solar project, not a power purchase agreement. And you're right, I think there wasn't interest at that time, and LEAP currently, as far as I know, is not pursuing that community solar model. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just know it's in the county, but we have representation on that board.
Yep.
And the second question is related to the resilience work. in my mind, one of the biggest things in resilience for the city to do is improving our floodplain regulations in anticipation of increased flooding events. Is that something that your team would be involved with, or is that separate in Public Works? And is it known what fiscal year that work might fall into?
Yeah, so I would say that as we have our staff working groups that are part of one of the Resilient Together tracks, that is the kind of thing that will come up, and like, how are we going to address that work? Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, as that flood resilience plan was being developed, I believe it has presented a challenge to the city in terms of roles and responsibilities on that topic area. And the further we go through the Resilient Together work, and the further it becomes understood and clear that increased flooding is a climate-driven risk, it will put us in a position to think about how to tackle that. So it is a broader conversation, including with some colleagues here.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And again, I've said it before, but I think it's a huge climate risk. It seems like it was a technical issue, but the Rivanna pump station, I think, shows how flooding is a force multiplier that can interact with a technical issue and create just a lot of problems. As just one example, and I know on a national scorecard, our regulations received an F, and I think it's just a long time coming to improve them. So, but that's it for me.
Before I ask anything, I wanted you to, can you repeat the information for any organization that's trying to access the grants?
Oh, yes. If you are interested in the climate resilience cohort, the address is resilient-together.info.
At Charlotte's, or,
No, that's it.
that's it?
Resilient-together.info. That'll get you there.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
thanks. I am also excited to see how cohesive this has become in the last couple of years, and also the progress that we've made towards that 2030 goal. I mean, pretty close.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, is there, if we meet it before then, do we move the goalposts, or what's the plan?
So
Or is that jinxing it by?
I don't think it's jinxing it. It's okay to talk about it. Yeah, I mean, that would be a community conversation, what we want to do with that. Since we adopted our targets, the guidance that some of the reporting, CDP, our reporting agency, gives is that communities in the United States, especially more wealthy communities, should have higher, what they're calling science-based targets. That's a jargony word. Our targets are absolutely science-based. They were based on the IPCC recommendations that were in place at the time that we adopted them. This climate work has many moving targets in it. And so now the recommendation is that in wealthier developed countries, our goals should be stronger and faster to really contemplate the equity components of meeting the 1.5 degree target of the Paris Climate Agreement. So it would be opening a big can of worms and having a new community conversation about whether we want to update our goals before 2030. I personally think that it's more important to just keep doing the work.
Yeah, because we do have that other goal coming up afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. And then I am very excited. I know we touched on it just for a second here, but I am very excited about the e-bike subsidy program that Ben and everyone has been working on. So I'm looking forward to that debuting, and just wanted to give that another little plug.
Yeah, thanks. Good. Yeah, we're excited about it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, just excellent work. As I was reading, can't say I read every word, but as I was looking through the package, skimming, scanning, reading what was there, I felt the same as Michael, just gratitude of how far we've come. I feel like we at least now have got a solid plan, and we're making progress on it. So kudos to all of y'all. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for y'all's support.
Lloyd?
Yeah, first I'd start by echoing the thanks and the praise. But I have a couple of specific questions. I'm wondering, there was mentioned that the CPACE program, there was some obstacle to our participation in it. What was that obstacle?
So that is a state level program that we would have to pass an ordinance to opt into. And the Office of Sustainability can't do that on our own without some legal support. And so we just need the attention and time from our legal office to move that process forward. And I think that we're starting to get that.
Is this something that is like an annual process to apply for, or can, whenever we get it together, you can apply for it?
Yep, if we can, so the state PACE authority has standard forms. They make it pretty easy for communities to join the state program, and we just need to make sure that our legal office is in agreement with those forms, and we would bring an ordinance to council to officially join, and then that would be it. We wouldn't have to renew that annually.
Okay. I note also that there was mention of we did not succeed in getting a grant from the EPA's Renew America's Schools grant program. Is there a particular reason that maybe we can score better on the next time we apply and have a better chance, or?
Yeah, that was a very competitive grant opportunity, and we were pretty disappointed because we had gotten very good feedback during the feedback phase of that grant opportunity. And then we also made the kind of difficult decision not to reapply for that funding because for the second round, EPA really drastically changed the format of the opportunity, and it was really designed to serve communities who hadn't done any energy audits or anything on their buildings. And since we have already gone through and done these energy studies on all of our facilities, we didn't need to start at the beginning and kind of start reinventing the wheel again. So we are always on the lookout for other funding opportunities that could fund that project, because I do think that the project that we developed through getting ready for that original Renew America Schools opportunity is a really strong, solid project, and we are looking for a place that it fits, for a funding opportunity that it fits.
And the report also referred to, I did read the report,
Yes, great. I'm so glad.
having a study done to figure out what a green bank might look like for Charlottesville. And you had an interesting sentence in there. Preliminary background information was shared, and recently, along with research assistant support, a study has been reinitiated with results anticipated later in 2024. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So you were in the meeting that we had last year, yes,
yeah.
with some folks from the UVA's Baton School,
Right.
and they thought maybe they could bring some funding and do the study, and then that kind of went by the wayside. So one of the community members who's a professor at UVA came back to us not too long ago and with some student support and said, we would like to continue this project in kind of a smaller way. So we are working with that professor and his graduate student to pursue what that could look like for the city.
'Cause you may recall my particular question was whether Charlottesville or Charlottesville-Albemarle or maybe the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, what the scope would have to be, how small could you be and have an effective green bank? And
Right.
that's the kind of thing that we needed to know. Nobody seemed to have a good answer.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot has happened even in the meanwhile since we've had that meeting. Through the Federal Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund program, there are a couple of big national financing coalitions that have received billions of dollars, and it seems like it might be a very productive use of our time and effort to figure out how we connect our community to those folks who are the finance experts.
Rather than trying to reinvent it.
Right, and that may be where trying to figure out how to scale a bank to our community might be harder and less effective than figuring out how do we stand up a hub that connects our community by humans to the incentives, whether it's for residential or non-residential.
And then the last question I had is sort of a broad question. It seems to me that a lot of what we have done as we sort of brag about the fact that we've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 42%, a lot of what we've done is to sit there and say, yeah, go Dominion, because they're responsible for a lot of that change. And my guess is that the that what we're working on at this point would seem to be sort of low-hanging fruit. In other words, easy to get reductions. Maybe the next 20% may be substantially more difficult to achieve than the first 40%. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you have a sense of what that curve is going to look like.
Yeah, so we are doing some modeling to have a better idea of what that curve could look like. But, so, we are fortunate to live in Virginia, where we live in a state that has a clean electricity standard for electricity. Like, it is really making our work much easier, but we still do have to do the work of electrifying everything, right? As the grid gets cleaner, we want to use more of that electricity to power our homes and our transportation systems. And so, you're right, like in the emissions reduction space, much of what we're seeing is from that grid greening. But I do think the work that we're doing is starting to contemplate how we can start doing that harder work, right? We are working to help electrify transportation. We are working to help people take advantage of all these incentives to do the work of electrifying their homes. So I do think that you know, you're absolutely right about where the emissions reductions are coming from, but we are starting to really contemplate that hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, so I
Oh.
concur with everyone said. I just want to know if you all are working with CEVA Gas on a decarbonization study. You're having input with that, and you feel comfortable with your input?
Yeah, we, Crystal's been instrumental in helping to plan some of the upcoming.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a series of listening sessions happening this summer, and the study itself was put on pause in order to get that feedback from the community. I will say out loud, I know that there's some confusion and frustration because people would like to see the menu of decarbonization options and to be able to pick and choose, but we're not there yet. And there's an acknowledgement that in order to consider some of the options, it's important to understand, like, how do people feel about their fuel source? How do people feel about the potential or the need to change? It's interesting, I think you saw at the work session, you have a number of people through the survey that indicated high value for gas and a high concern about climate. These are things that we have to wrestle with. And then I believe there are people in this community have some really good ideas that they could say to us. And so why wait till the study is done before we invite people to say, if you have decarbonization ideas, please tell us now. Now would be the right time. So there's still 2 more sessions. One is tomorrow and one is in August. So.
Thank you all.
Actually, I'm so sorry. I actually have one more question. Do you all have any legislative priorities you would like us to help communicate? And if so, you can tell us now, or you can just send a little note after.
I think we will, and it may depend on this election cycle.
Okay. The legislative committee meets in September.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
if you want
I
to
would
send
like-
any
we would like to
preliminary,
engage. Yep.
preliminary things, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
I was just going to say, there is a little section on the report of where we were able to engage legislatively and with state level advocacy, if you're interested.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
We now will have the Vibrant Community Fund, Misty and Hunter.
You guys are very smart. Prepare to be underwhelmed. Extremely underwhelmed.
That's not true.
No.
Oh, just kidding. But no, thanks for having us. Hello, everyone. Appreciate you guys taking the time to talk with us today. We're going to go over a few key points in the interim cycle. So we just wrapped up in April, with the previous cycle, and we have orientation starting up in August. So it's a good time to sit down and talk about some things that came up that maybe we want to talk about or make some decisions on. So we're going to get started. Some things you might want to ponder on or think about. Let's see if I can do this. All right. We're going to do a brief overview of the whole process, very simple overview. If anybody does want to know more about the process, after this we can meet with you in the 221s if you're curious about it. We'll do a brief one. We're going to go over some suggested adjustments that we've been kind of kicking around and considering. A quick slide about opportunities and partnerships, and then maybe like a list of the decision points and the next steps for the Vibrant Community Fund for the next process. So basically, and a lot of you are familiar with this, the way this works is in August, we will start the orientation cycle. That includes orienting applicants, new applicants. We actually do a Q&A prior to that for people that are just kind of curious or not sure about it. So I'll do a Q&A session. People come down and just learn about what it is. Then we start orientations. We do applicants first, then we do review team members. We go over any changes, updates, the application process. The application is released usually around mid-September, depending on a lot of different things. It's open for about 30 days. We close it, then the review team starts. The reviewing starts. We set up the evaluation matrix during that process, which is used by the review teams to be as quantitative and as objective as possible. Usually that wraps up October to into January by the time we do all the site visits and do all the reviews and the teamwork. Funding recommendations come out between January and February, and then in March we start coming back and meeting with you about how the next thing works. Funny thing to me is that we're talking about, like, the applicants are always blown, their minds are blown that we're talking about July 1 money in, July of the current year for the next year. It still can be tricky to talk about which fiscal year you're talking about. And then we do post-award feedback sessions. I did those this year too. So with the applicants and the review team members, we do post-award feedback sessions. We sit down and either via Zoom and in person, they tell me what worked, what didn't work, and they help me tweak the process to see what I can do to make it simpler for them, or if that's possible. So some of the suggested adjustments, number one, you probably won't be surprised, is we've been kicking around putting a cap of $150,000 on requests. We had, I believe, we had 6 applicants in the previous year that asked for more than that. One of those was some of those were split into 2 different applications. So there might be an applicant that applied for 150 here or 100 here and 75 there. We're thinking about doing it 150 per organization at this point. It doesn't do any drastic, impact to the whole process, but it does limit people that want to ask for more. We're planning to make 75,000 and above the site visit trigger instead of 100, because there's a lot of organizations that we miss in that 75 to 100 range that would be helpful to go see and meet and talk to about what they're asking for. We're asking council to develop or approve a process for how organizations are added to the fundamental list and or removed from the fundamental list. So if you can remember, there was a group of fundamental organizations that we have that provide a significant or important or otherwise necessary service, and there currently isn't a very clear system on how they are in or out. That process predates my work in it to a certain extent, so I wasn't around for how it got developed in the first place, but I do think it's something we should all think about.
It's been going on for at least 5 years, changing every year.
Right, so we're trying to bring attention to it to clarify it, and I'm aware of that, but I think it's time to maybe discuss it at some point. We think that's time. And I think, too, talking about how groups go in and out of that, how it works. The review process may change some this year, too. They mentioned the Office of Community Solutions. We're working together pretty closely now. This year, we're planning to have that team do a preliminary review of all applications for technical reasons. Are they eligible? Do they align with priority areas and community member team? And then the community member teams focus on the impact, like we traditionally do. But anyone that comes in asking for things that would exclude them or otherwise make them ineligible, actually also too for like technical budgetary issues, like what's the budget looking like here, so they can clean those things up so that the review team members can focus on the impact, feasibility, and then and how important they are to the priority area. And then we are going to we're shooting to eliminate that dual score thing where we have like a 2A or, like the quality and importance. We're trying to merge the importance criteria into the matrix so that we're left with one score that's less confusing for applicants. So we will get rid of that matrix and you'll just have a singular score that encompasses everything into one number or letter, however it works. We're going to try to develop some exclusionary criteria, whether that is, these are just some examples, if someone is requesting consultant fees or if a project's not benefiting city residents, they don't particularly work in the city, if they're not within the defined priority areas, and potentially deficient in what will be reporting status that's starting up this year new. So the Office of Community Solutions and I are also going to have a more robust, more organized reporting mechanism And so it's going to be cleaner, clearer, and more informative, really, as opposed to how it has been. And so those could be some reasons why someone will be excluded from the process. We're going to shoot to provide additional information about agency requests in the report that we present for context. And we're hoping to have more notice to council before, so you have more time to read, review, and ask questions before the public period, if that's something that we can execute. The timeline does get a little tight. Even though it's a year, it still gets a little tight. I know it sounds crazy, but it is something we have to consider. And we plan to present the HOPS applications and just HOPS, not GAP, right? The HOPS and VCF at the same time, because there's some dually applying organizations that apply for both. And we thought it was a good idea to have them both at the same time for context, to compare and contrast what folks are asking for.
Quick question. So for exclusionary criteria, are you going to make that more clear in the application process? Like these things will be, okay.
Right,
I think
and
that's very helpful.
we're bringing this to use for consideration too. If there's something that council wants us to add or not add, that's what we're bringing this to you for, to consider in the next month, so we can add it or delete it. That's a good point, by the way, because once we release the application and the instructions, we have to stick to it. You know, we're not going to be able to adjust it or change it during the process. Like once we're out, we're out. And so that'll go out, and that information will go out towards typically the end of August. So we have a little over a month. I can extend that a little bit if necessary, but it does, to be honest with you, the big issue is the holiday season. We're trying to do this stuff over Christmas and New Year's. It really complicates things. We can't ever seem to get back on track after the holidays, so I try to get as much done on the front end as possible. Oh, wrong way. We are continuing to work with the Center for Nonprofit Excellence and the Equity Center for best practice and community engagement support. It's been pretty wonderful to work with them. There's another developing community group that includes the CIC, UVA, some other groups too, in order how to help newer and kind of developing organizations determine where they fit through a bigger process, whether they're a business or nonprofit, for instance. And they were looking to work with us on that as well. We're continuing to try to work with the county and other community partners for improved private and public collaboration, so other grantors, to see if we can, move somebody over here, or do you have something for these people so we can make them whole without having to fund it all ourselves. As I said, that is it. Not as robust or as in-depth as the climate people, but
it's a competition.
But I'm ready to lose. Sometimes just got to lose. But those are the things we'd like for you to be considered. Obviously not here, not now if you don't want to. I'm up for questions, comments, or any clarifications that I can provide you.
Is this something we have to approve, or is this something you all can make decisions about within your department?
We could, but the issue to bring it here is so that there's clarity and there's like time to discuss it, so there isn't a surprise or anything, anybody's caught off guard in the review process. I think we want to make sure that when we release this, that you all are okay with it. As far as the exclusionary criteria, we can make those decisions. We can go with them 1 year and change them next year. Those things aren't huge. I think for me, for us, it's the fundamental part of it is an important part of that, and approving any caps and that kind of thing, make sure everybody's on board with that.
So the question of reducing the cap, what, to 150, is that?
That's what we are suggesting.
Right, so I'm thinking, you said it was 6 that were getting more than that, so they would, if we were to support that, they would, could get whatever the reduction is, not for necessarily for them not doing something right, but based on a new policy, is that?
Well, this would be the max request. We would set the request at max at 150. So if they could apply for 150, and if they have a fantastic, perfect application, they would get that 150. But people that have asked for more than 150 in the past would have to reduce that down to this cap.
Right.
And
I might not be understanding what you're saying to me.
Yeah, so I think that what you're saying is that if this year, if they got 220 or whatever,
Yeah.
then next year they will have a $70,000 reduction.
Yes.
I just want to make sure, okay.
Well, I guess one implication is if you cap it at $150,000, in full recognition, this is a limited pool of funds. They would just need to engage with the city during the budget process to make an ask that's larger than that through a different process than the VCF. And they could still get awarded that money, but it would be a very different process because they would need to engage at the beginning of the budget cycle to figure out, do we work that into our budget some other way? I mean, is that accurate?
Are you asking me that question?
I don't know who I'm asking.
I mean, I don't know.
I think what can be complicated is that you are made aware of the Vibrant Community Fund awards at the same time as those budget council sessions are happening. And so but it would be, I guess, developing a process. We would need to be clear about the equitable process and the access that folks have to come to council in another way.
I would offer that the clarifying point is that technically, if you were to suggest that you prefer setting a cap, which did come up this time around, then that would be the new maximum amount that an individual organization would be eligible to receive. What we had talked about was if someone still asked above that, maybe we take that under consideration and bring that back to council a different way, but that would be the only way. There wouldn't be a secondary process that we're proposing.
And that's my understanding and what I agree with. I guess the point is just, I think it's reasonable if someone's making a $500,000 ask of the city. To me, it seems reasonable to have a deeper engagement with staff and council that's just fully a part of our budget process from the beginning, similar to when we've made investments of $500,000-$600,000 as part of a budget cycle that just wasn't VCF. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I'm thinking of it. And to me, that seems reasonable, and the cap seems reasonable, again, just in recognition that this is a limited amount of funds, that every single year we have far more applicants than money available. And if you have a system where you automatically receive a percentage of funding, one person can put in a request for $1 million and eat up the whole thing, or the majority of the thing, and that there's no perfect way to do it, but that cap seems better to me.
Yeah.
Where did the number 150 come from?
Honestly, reviewing the past few years of applications to see what the impact would be, and it just really became like the number. I mean, it was not as scientific as I'd like to tell you, but we looked at the last 3-4 years of applicants, and it wasn't going to really impact a large percentage of applicants. And there were only, I mean, I think there was there were a couple for 150, there was one for about 170, there was a 250, and there was a 480. So it wasn't like a lot of people that were applying for more. And we would have to talk to those folks. I mean, they would know, and they're going to call. They're going to call me, and I will talk to them about this, and they're going to have to work that out. But based on what we are seeing, it seems like the logical thing to do is to put a cap on it, because otherwise it may, like you were saying, it could escalate and we'd be in the hard times.
Right, and then it gives the opportunity to stretch those dollars to additional organizations.
That's right, and it's to manage expectations for the organizations based on how we encouraged for a period of time a zero-based budget. And so we just understand that there is limited dollars, and we picked that number because it was an incremental enough change that didn't impact a tremendous amount of applicants.
And I will say too, that's part of one of the side parts of this is trying to partner with private donors and organizations to educate them about who we have, and are there other ways to fund these organizations kind of centrally. And so in addition to limiting it, we're trying to expand how we work with other partners to do that as well.
And it is important to hear council's reaction to the suggestion of a cap, because now is the time that information needs to be shared so that individual groups can begin to make adjustments. That gives them the notice that we would like to give them early on.
One reason why the notion of the cap is appealing to me is that it seems to me that there ought to be a number, and whether 150 is the right number or 200, I'm not sure, somewhere in there. There ought to be a number where if the city is going to give this organization that much money, a couple things. Number one, we probably ought to be having a more detailed look at the governance structure, for example, of the organization, and you know, then I don't know whether you all have been doing that kind of study, but we don't see it. We don't evaluate anything based on governance kinds of issues, or at least we don't say that we do. Also, that at some point, if we're talking about that much money, it ought to be because the city council or city council and city manager and so on have collectively decided that that's a particular goal that we really want to emphasize. And I've tried to think of the kinds of things that we give money to with a Vibrant Community Fund as things that we look at and we say, okay, that's not a city priority exactly, but it's a really good idea. And if it's something that's important enough for us to make it a priority and to have some broader effort for, it kind of feels like maybe that kind of money ought to be spent in conjunction with other similar spendings and with some sort of cohesive, almost sort of ecosystem look at whatever that problem might be. Now, that may be asking for a broader analysis on your part and on our part than we have ever done. But maybe that's what we ought to be looking to do.
And you're speaking of the higher request, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So before we go on, just if we can get an idea of where we stand on the cap, Brian, what are your thoughts on it?
I think it's a good idea. It would be interesting if you had like median, you had some statistics in terms of median, average, you know, the maybe not standard deviation, but some way of saying what a good upper number might be. I personally would be okay with a $200,000 cap. But if 150 is y'all's best judgment of where things should be, then I respect that.
Thank you. Natalie, I don't think you shared your...
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense because it does that expectation management. It stretches the dollar for more organizations. And then kind of Lloyd and Michael were saying the same thing basically, is if you need more money than that, you become kind of a separate budget item, not a Vibrant Community Fund item. And I would pull up the budget to check on the organizations that it would affect. And you're right, most of them, there's a handful that are right at that 150. Would there be a process of, I don't know, like adjusting that cap with inflation or something, because their expenses are going to shift?
Well, I would say would we increase the fund equally?
Right.
We couldn't really increase the cap if we're not increasing the total
fund.
Yeah. It would seem counterintuitive to me, but so I would ask you, are you going to increase the fund?
Yeah.
I need to increase the
In the abstract,
cap.
sure.
Right. Yeah. In the
Just,
abstract, sure. Okay.
In the practical, no. Chrissy told
We'll
me to
just
say
keep that in mind, that at some point when we adjust the funds, that number might adjust as well.
So, Michael, it sounds like you're in support of it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would be too. I don't have the numbers pulled up like Natalie, but I would like to just kind of know what they're like, because if they're getting, I just use the example of 220 now, and we make the cap, they're going to be coming to us anyway, lobbying us. So, but if it's 200 and most of them are in that range, then we can say, well, I can maybe justify, a little reduction type of
So
thing.
do you need like a statement of 150 or 200 right
Do you
now?
have it plotted? Maybe we can get it plotted.
I've done some of that stuff you're talking about. I didn't
Yeah.
include it here. I was trying to keep it brief, simple, and to the point. But I can go back and get the information if you need, and what the averages are and all that. I can do a couple of years of that.
One of the organizations that has over 150 that I would be a little bit concerned about is the Jefferson School. They're at 246 currently. So that would
Jefferson,
be,
that's a separate, Jefferson School applies for a small amount for Robertson Community Fund. The other part of that is a rent, I believe, that we
Right.
pay. So that's a
okay, so
different-
it's listed in one
Yeah, it's
line
different.
item on the budget, but it's.
That's a little off.
Okay,
Yeah,
great,
but
But
okay.
I think they receive 54,000 in the Robertson Community Fund.
That sounds about right.
For program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it, okay, then that line item
So,
doesn't have that broken out. So, sorry, I've got one more question. How flexible is that number? Like, if we do it this year and you're like, ooh, actually, like 175 would have been better, or like 140 is okay.
It's really like.
Could do it every year.
This is, we've never done it before.
Okay,
And so
I
we're
wasn't sure.
exploring it, and so like, we've done some other math around how to get there. Most people are falling in the below 100.
Sure.
Predominantly, less than 100. So it's really just the first shot at looking at this, and the number's definitely flexible. I mean, it's not.
But not flexible in the middle of.
Yes, of
the
course, of
cycle-
course.
Yeah.
Cycle,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it sounds
you-
like most folks are comfortable with 200,000.
Which we could do.
And
An auction.
some are okay with 150, so would it be reasonable, since this is the first year that we're instituting a cap, to just start with 200 and go from there? And see what the plot lines look like in FY '25?
I can provide information in the interim by the end of the week, by the way, current math. On
That works for me, Ms. Graves, but I don't know what other people think.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with 150. I'm fine with 200, and I would defer to you all what you think is the best way to begin.
I don't have strong feelings either way, whatever your math
Yeah.
leads you to.
same here. I would like to see the information, then, no, I'll share it, but,
Yeah. The piece I had some more interest in as well was how do we decide what a fundamental agency is and how that shifts in and out, I guess, groups that come in and groups that come out.
That's a separate conversation.
Okay.
Because that's on the budget side, not on the VCF side.
Yeah.
So is that something we'll get presented with later?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
work on that again.
I'll defer to City Manager Sanders.
Yes, I'm looking for help in the back. We'll work it out and we'll come back on that one.
And
Like Michael always says this every year, and I agree with it. I mean, there's always going to be this tension of this is the process, these are the procedures, we have to have consistency, but at the same time, you can't always make everything fit, and I think that's where there's a level of discretion on our part. And
And we're in
We-
development years where we're improving and learning. and-
yeah, and every year I think it gets a little better from my perspective. I've only been through 3 budgets. The others may differ. But.
yeah, I would just second that, and as you said, I've said every year, but I'll state it again. I mean, we're a public body. There is no way to separate politics from a public body's budget, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that as electeds, we hear from citizens, and you all do too, but just in a different way. If there's a process where, and not just this, but CDBG, HOPS, CAF, where 90% of the recommendations in the process are followed, but 10% of that total budget is adjusted, to me, that's about as good as a process I feel like a public body could ever get to, and that's just the nature of how this works. And
Yeah, 5 to 10%, something like that. That's the noise.
Lloyd, you have any other comments? So I appreciate y'all work on this. This is, it has been, 3 budgets, but in my mind, we sometimes get through the big numbers, the millions of dollars, and then we're down to, $1,500 for this nonprofit or not that, because this is really where the service is out the hands of the city, touches the residents in the most tangible way with these nonprofits, and so they come out, and so it's your work is really important, and I appreciate you all being so helpful, because I know that you all provide incredible customer service, because people tell me that they come and you are very helpful. So thank you for your work that you're doing, and kind of, we know that, I know that it's hard for us to make some decisions sometime, but it's appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll get some information out to everybody as soon as I can get it for your consideration.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Sam, I think that this would be, also a good time to just get an update. I was recently talking to Marianne Doyle with CNE. about just the status of nonprofits in the community. Is that something like probably during this time, if we could get, a 5 or 10 minute update on just, I don't know if she could come like now, or, you could choose a time just to get an update on the status of nonprofits, generally speaking, in the community, because they play such a big role. It would be good to, I would like that. I don't, if others would want that as well. You can,
Sure.
I'm fine to have them come at some point.
yeah,
All right.
thank you. Are there other comments at this point? If not, we're going to close session.
Yes, I would move the following for a city council closed session pursuant to section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code. I move that the city council close this open meeting and convene in a closed session as authorized by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as follows. 1, under Virginia Code section 2.2-3711A1, for discussion and consideration of assignment, appointment, performance, demotion, salary, discipline, and or resignation of a specific named employee of the public body. And 2, under Virginia Code section 2.2-3711A3, for discussion and consideration of the acquisition of specific real property to mitigate displacement of residents and or their property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. And 3, under Virginia Code section 2.2-3711A6, for discussion and consideration of the investment of public funds related to the Water Street Garage where competition or bargaining is involved, where, if made public initially, the financial interests of the city would be adversely affected.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, please cast your vote. Okay, city council is now in closed session and will return at 6:30. For those joining by Zoom, there will be a separate link then. Thank you. We'll be back in about an hour.